So my boyfriend Tobias just texted me 30 minutes ago asking if I want to grab dinner tonight because he has something important to tell me. The same Tobias who spent last weekend at another woman's apartment and sent me a selfie from her bed to prove some twisted point about trust. Yeah, that Tobias. I'm sitting here staring at my phone trying to figure out if he's actually lost his mind or if this is some elaborate test to see how much disrespect I'll tolerate. Because honestly, after the last 3 weeks of this absolute insanity, I'm starting to think it might be both. Let me back up and explain how we got to this point. Because this whole situation has been such a train wreck that I need to write it all out just to make sense of it myself. Plus, I need you guys to tell me if I'm crazy or if my boyfriend has completely crossed every line that exists in a relationship. 3 weeks ago, Tobias came home from work and casually mentioned that his friend Andrea was having roommate drama. Her roommate had bailed with 2 weeks' notice and she was freaking out about making rent. Normal friend crisis, right? I was ready to be supportive, maybe suggest some roommate finding apps or offer to help her post on social media. But then Tobias drops this bomb on me like it's the most reasonable thing in the world. He tells me he's going to stay at Andrea's place for a few weeks to help with rent while she finds someone new. Just like that. No discussion, no asking how I felt about it, just a straight-up announcement that my boyfriend was moving in with another woman. I actually laughed at first because I thought he had to be joking. Who announces that they're essentially moving in with a female friend and expects their girlfriend to just smile and wave? But Tobias wasn't laughing. He was looking at me like I was supposed to be impressed by his generosity or something. When I told him I wasn't comfortable with that arrangement, he got this condescending look on his face and said I was being selfish. Selfish. Like wanting my boyfriend to not live with another woman makes me some kind of terrible person. He said if I trusted him, this wouldn't be an issue, and that my reaction was showing my true colors. I tried explaining that this wasn't about trust. It was about boundaries and respect, that most couples wouldn't be okay with this kind of setup regardless of trust levels. But Tobias kept circling back to this narrative that I was being controlling and insecure. Like those are dirty words that should make me back down and apologize. The argument went on for hours. He kept bringing up random examples of times I'd been friendly with male coworkers, or when my ex Brian texted about some old stuff at my place. He acted like those situations were somehow equivalent to him literally living with another woman. The mental gymnastics were honestly impressive. What really got to me was how he kept framing Andrea's situation like she was some helpless victim who would end up homeless without his personal intervention. This woman is 25, has a decent job, and graduated college. She's not helpless. There are a million ways to handle roommate issues that don't involve my boyfriend moving in to play house with her. But according to Tobias, I was being heartless for suggesting alternatives. Every solution I proposed was shot down because apparently nothing could possibly work except him personally saving the day by becoming her temporary live-in roommate. The hero complex was unreal. The worst part was finding out that Andrea knew all about our fights. Tobias had been discussing our relationship problems with her, getting her input on how to handle my supposed trust issues. The fact that they were analyzing my behavior and strategizing about our relationship behind my back made me absolutely furious. So I held my ground. I told him I wasn't comfortable with the arrangement and that there had to be other ways to help Andrea that didn't involve him moving in with her. I thought maybe he'd respect my feelings enough to find a compromise. Boy, was I wrong. Last Friday night, Tobias announced he was going over to Andrea's place to help her organize her spare room for potential roommate interviews. He said he'd probably stay late since they had a lot to sort through. Fine, whatever. I had plans with my friend Laura anyway, so I didn't think much of it. But then Saturday morning rolled around and I hadn't heard from him. No good morning text, no check-in, nothing. When I finally texted asking how the organizing went, he responded with the most casual message saying he'd ended up crashing there because they worked until really late and he was too tired to drive home. I was annoyed, but I tried to be understanding. Maybe they really had worked late and it was a practical decision. But then around noon, my phone buzzes with a notification that made my blood boil. It was a selfie from Tobias, in Andrea's bed, shirtless, with the caption, "Some people trust, some people don't." I stared at that picture for a solid 5 minutes trying to process what I was seeing. My boyfriend had spent the night at another woman's place, woke up in her bed, and decided the appropriate response was to send me a photo proving it with some smug caption about trust. The audacity was breathtaking. Like, who does that? Who thinks sending their girlfriend a shirtless selfie from another woman's bed is going to prove a point about trust? It was like he was deliberately trying to push every button I had. I called him immediately, and he answered on the first ring sounding way too cheerful. When I asked what the hell he thought he was doing sending me that picture, he had the nerve to act confused. He said he thought I'd appreciate him being transparent about where he was instead of hiding it. Transparent. Like taking a selfie in another woman's bed is transparency and not a deliberate provocation. The conversation escalated quickly from there. I told him that sending that picture was disrespectful and hurtful, and that spending the night at Andrea's place crossed a line for me. But instead of apologizing or showing any understanding of why I was upset, he doubled down. He said I was proving his point about not trusting him, and that if I was secure in our relationship, I wouldn't be making such a big deal about him helping a friend. He actually had the audacity to say that my reaction was exactly why he needed to reconsider our relationship dynamics. That's when I realized this wasn't just about Andrea's roommate situation anymore. This was about Tobias testing how much he could get away with, seeing how far he could push my boundaries before I'd finally snap. And honestly, he was about to find out. But the real kicker came Sunday evening when I got a Facebook message from Andrea herself. I'd never spoken to this woman directly in my life, but apparently she felt entitled to insert herself into our relationship drama. Her message was short and sweet. She told me that I should grow a backbone if I wanted to date someone like Tobias, and that my insecurity was embarrassing to watch. She said that Tobias deserved someone who could handle him having female friends without creating drama. I screenshotted that message so fast it wasn't even funny. The absolute audacity of this woman to message me about my own relationship was beyond anything I could have imagined. And the fact that she was clearly discussing our private business with Tobias made it even worse. When I confronted Tobias about Andrea's message, he barely seemed surprised. He said she was just looking out for him because she could see how stressed our fights were making him. He actually defended her right to message me and said maybe I should listen to what she had to say. That was the moment I realized I was dating someone who thought it was appropriate for his female friend to lecture his girlfriend about relationship boundaries. Someone who saw nothing wrong with another woman telling me how to handle my own boyfriend. So here we are, 3 weeks into this absolute disaster. And Tobias just texted asking if I want to have dinner tonight so he can tell me something important. Part of me is curious about what he thinks is so important that it requires a special announcement. But a bigger part of me is already planning exactly what I'm going to say to him. Because while Tobias has been playing these little games and testing my boundaries, I've been doing some planning of my own. And I think it's time for him to learn that some tests go both ways. I'll update you guys after tonight's dinner conversation. Something tells me this is going to be interesting. First update, I don't even know where to start with what just happened at dinner tonight. I'm sitting in my car in the restaurant parking lot right now because I literally cannot even process what Tobias just pulled. So remember how he wanted to meet for dinner to tell me something important? Well, buckle up because this man has completely lost his freaking mind. And I'm honestly questioning if I ever knew him at all. I got to the restaurant first and spent about 10 minutes mentally preparing myself for whatever bombshell he was about to drop. Part of me was hoping maybe he'd come to his senses about the whole Andrea situation and wanted to apologize. Nope, not even close. Tobias walked in looking way too confident for someone who'd spent the weekend disrespecting his girlfriend in every possible way. He slid into the booth across from me with this smile that I used to think was charming, but now just looked smug. No apology, no acknowledgement of how messed up the last few days had been. Just casual small talk like nothing had happened. When I asked him what was so important that we needed to have a special dinner conversation, he got this serious expression and said he'd been doing a lot of thinking about our relationship and where things were heading. My stomach dropped because that tone usually means someone's about to get dumped. But instead of breaking up with me, he launched into this whole speech about how he'd realized that our recent conflicts had shown him some concerning patterns in my behavior. He said he was worried about my trust issues and how they might affect our future together. The audacity of this man to flip the script and make me the problem after everything he'd done was absolutely mind-blowing. I interrupted him right there and asked if he was seriously sitting across from me trying to make his inappropriate behavior my fault. But he just kept going with his rehearsed little speech about how relationships required trust and compromise, and how he'd been reflecting on whether I was really ready for the kind of mature relationship he was looking for. Then he dropped the real bomb. He said he'd decided to move forward with helping Andrea regardless of my feelings about it because he wasn't going to let my insecurities dictate how he treated his friends. He announced this like it was some noble stand he was taking for friendship and loyalty. I stared at him for a solid 30 seconds trying to process what I'd just heard. This man had just told me that he was moving in with another woman despite my clearly stated boundaries, and he was framing it like some kind of principled decision rather than a massive betrayal of our relationship. I asked him if he was actually telling me that he was choosing to prioritize Andrea's housing situation over my comfort and our relationship boundaries. His response was that he wasn't choosing anyone over anyone else, he was just refusing to abandon a friend in need because his girlfriend couldn't handle it. The conversation that followed was honestly surreal. Tobias kept insisting that this wasn't about choosing Andrea over me, it was about me learning to trust him and support his friendships. He said that if I really loved him, I'd want him to be the kind of person who shows up for his friends when they need help. Every time I tried to explain why his decision was hurtful and disrespectful, he'd counter with some variation of how my reaction proved I wasn't ready for a serious relationship. He kept using phrases like emotional maturity and healthy boundaries, but apparently those concepts only applied to me adapting to whatever he wanted to do. What really got me was how he kept acting like I was asking him to abandon Andrea completely, rather than just maintain appropriate boundaries. When I pointed out that there were a million ways to help a friend that didn't involve moving in with them, he said those alternatives wouldn't be as effective, and that Andrea specifically needed someone she could trust living in her space. I asked him why it had to be him specifically, and he said Andrea had asked him because she felt safest with him. The way he said it made it clear that he was flattered by being her chosen protector, and that my discomfort was just an inconvenient obstacle to his hero fantasy. The whole conversation felt like he was reading from some kind of manipulation playbook. Every concern I raised was reframed as a character flaw on my part. Every boundary I tried to set was dismissed as controlling or insecure. It was like arguing with someone who'd already decided I was wrong about everything and was just going through the motions of pretending to listen. What made it even worse was how calm and rational he was being, while completely steamrolling over everything I was saying. He had this condescending therapist voice going like he was helping me work through my issues rather than defending completely inappropriate behavior. When I asked him how he'd feel if the situation was reversed and I decided to move in with some male friend to help him out, Tobias actually laughed. He said that was completely different because he trusted me and wouldn't feel threatened by something like that. The smugness in his voice when he said it made me want to throw my water glass at his head. I pressed him on that double standard and asked him to really think about whether he'd be okay with me living with another man for several weeks. That's when his whole calm, rational act started to crack a little. He said the situations weren't comparable because Andrea genuinely needed help, while my hypothetical male friend would just be taking advantage of my kindness. The mental gymnastics were honestly impressive. Somehow, when Andrea needed help, it was a legitimate crisis that required Tobias's personal intervention. But if I were to help a male friend in the exact same way, that guy would automatically be a user trying to take advantage of me. The double standard was so blatant it was almost funny. But the real kicker came when I asked him what he expected our relationship to look like while he was living with Andrea. Would we still see each other regularly? Would I be welcome to visit him at her place? How long was this arrangement supposed to last? That's when Tobias got really uncomfortable and started giving me vague non-answers about how we'd figure it out as we went along. He said he couldn't put a timeline on helping a friend and that I'd need to be flexible about our usual routines, while Andrea got back on her feet. When I pushed for more specifics, he finally admitted that Andrea wasn't really comfortable with me coming around while she was dealing with her housing stress. He said she felt like my presence might create tension and drama that would make an already difficult situation even harder for her. So let me get this straight. My boyfriend was moving in with another woman who didn't want me visiting, for an indefinite period of time, to help with a problem that could be solved in dozens of other ways. And somehow I was the unreasonable one for having an issue with this arrangement. I asked him if he could hear how insane that sounded, and he said Andrea's feelings were valid too and that everyone involved deserved to feel comfortable in their living space. Apparently everyone except me, since my feelings about my own boyfriend's living arrangements didn't seem to matter at all. I sat back in that booth and really looked at the man across from me, and I realized I was seeing him clearly for the first time in 8 months. This wasn't some temporary lapse in judgment or miscommunication about boundaries. This was who he actually was when he couldn't manipulate me into going along with what he wanted. So I asked him one simple question. I said, if our roles were reversed and I announced that I was moving in with some guy despite his objections, would he be okay with that? Not just okay, but actually supportive and understanding about it? The look that crossed his face told me everything I needed to know before he even opened his mouth. For just a split second, his mask slipped, and I saw exactly how he really felt about the idea of me prioritizing another man's needs over his comfort. But then he caught himself and went back to his rational therapist voice. He said that hypothetical situations weren't helpful, and that we needed to focus on the actual circumstances we were dealing with. When I pointed out that his inability to answer my question was pretty telling, he said I was trying to trap him and that my argumentative attitude was exactly why he was concerned about our relationship dynamic. Everything was my fault. My argumentative attitude, my trust issues, my inability to support his friendships, my lack of emotional maturity. According to Tobias, I was basically a walking red flag who was lucky he was patient enough to help me work through my problems. By the time we left the restaurant, he'd made it crystal clear that he was moving in with Andrea whether I liked it or not, and that my job as his girlfriend was to smile and be supportive while he played house with another woman who'd specifically requested that I stay away. But here's the thing that Tobias doesn't realize. While he was busy outlining all the ways I needed to change my behavior and attitude, I was making some plans of my own. Because if he thinks I'm just going to sit around waiting for him to come back from his little domestic experiment with Andrea, he's about to learn exactly how wrong he can be. I've got some thinking to do tonight, and tomorrow I'm making some phone calls. If Tobias wants to test my boundaries and see how much disrespect I'll tolerate, he's about to get his answer. And something tells me it's not going to be what he's expecting. I'll update you guys tomorrow after I've had some time to process this whole mess and figure out my next move. But spoiler alert, I'm done being the understanding girlfriend who makes excuses for her boyfriend's inappropriate behavior. The gloves are officially coming off. Second update. You guys, I am having way too much fun with this situation, and honestly, watching Tobias dig himself deeper into this hole while thinking he's being so clever has become my new favorite entertainment. If he wants to play games and test my boundaries, well, two can definitely play that game. So remember how I said the gloves were coming off? Well, I spent Wednesday making some calls and setting things in motion, and let me tell you, I've been having an absolute blast watching this whole thing unfold. Wednesday night, Tobias texted me this casual little announcement about packing his stuff to move into Andrea's place over the weekend. No discussion, no checking in, just this matter-of-fact message like he was telling me he picked up dry cleaning. The audacity was honestly impressive, but also gave me the perfect opportunity to start having some fun. Instead of getting upset or arguing with him, I responded with, "That's nice, honey, make sure you pack your toothbrush. Wouldn't want Andrea to think you have bad hygiene when you're playing house together." The passive-aggressive sweetness was chef's kiss perfect. He called me within 10 minutes, clearly confused by my response. When he asked why I was being sarcastic, I told him I wasn't being sarcastic at all. I was just being supportive of his new living arrangement with his female friend. The way I said supportive made it clear I was mocking him, but he couldn't quite call me out on it. That phone call was honestly hilarious. Tobias kept trying to bait me into an argument about boundaries and trust, but I just kept responding with these sweet, understanding comments that were obviously sarcastic, but technically supportive. Every time he'd explain why his decision was reasonable, I'd say something like, "Oh, absolutely, that makes perfect sense. I'm sure Andrea really appreciates having such a caring roommate." By the end of the call, he was clearly frustrated that I wasn't giving him the dramatic reaction he was expecting. He actually asked me directly why I wasn't more upset about his decision, and I told him that I'd been doing some thinking and had come to some interesting conclusions about our relationship. When he pressed me for details, I said we could discuss it later because I had some plans of my own to figure out. The confusion in his voice was absolutely delicious. He'd expected me to be begging him not to move in with Andrea, not making mysterious comments about my own plans. Thursday morning, I woke up to a string of texts from him documenting his packing progress like I was supposed to care about the logistics of him moving in with another woman. He sent pictures of boxes and even asked if I wanted to help him load his car. The level of delusion was honestly breathtaking. But instead of ignoring the messages, I decided to have some fun with them. I responded to each picture with increasingly ridiculous comments. When he sent a photo of his clothes packed up, I wrote, "Ah, make sure you pack something nice for your dinner dates with Andrea." When he showed me his toiletries box, I said, "Don't forget condoms. You never know what might happen during those late-night movie sessions." The fact that he couldn't tell if I was being serious or mocking him made it even better. He kept sending confused responses, asking what I meant, and I'd just send back innocent emojis like I had no idea why he was confused. Thursday afternoon, I put phase 2 of my plan into action. Remember my ex Brian that Tobias had thrown in my face during our trust arguments? Well, I decided it was time for him to meet his match when it came to opposite-sex friendships. I texted Brian asking if he wanted to grab coffee and catch up, and his response was immediate and enthusiastic. When we met up, I told him about Tobias's living situation with Andrea, and Brian's reaction was everything I'd hoped for. He was shocked and said he couldn't believe any guy would disrespect his girlfriend like that. But here's where it gets good. While we were talking, I started getting texts from Tobias updating me on his move-in progress. So I started reading them out loud to Brian, and we both started laughing about how ridiculous the whole situation was. Brian said he couldn't believe Tobias was actually sending me play-by-play updates about moving in with another woman, and that if he were my boyfriend, he'd be focused on making me feel secure, not some random female friend. That's when I got a brilliant idea. I asked Brian if he wanted to help me send Tobias a little message of my own. Brian was immediately on board, so we took a selfie together at the coffee shop and I posted it to my Instagram story with the caption, "Catching up with old friends who actually know how to respect boundaries." Within 20 minutes, my phone was buzzing with a call from Tobias. When I answered, he immediately asked who I was with and why I was posting cryptic Instagram stories. I told him I was just catching up with Brian and that we'd been having a really interesting conversation. The jealousy in his voice was immediate and obvious. He started asking all these questions about why I was hanging out with my ex and what we'd been talking about. When I told him that Brian had been giving me some perspective on my current relationship situation, Tobias got this panicked edge to his voice. I stayed completely calm and said that since he was exploring new living arrangements, I figured I could explore reconnecting with old friends too. I could practically hear his brain short-circuiting on the other end. Friday morning, Tobias called to let me know he was officially moved in at Andrea's place, but his tone was way less cheerful than before. He kept asking about my plans for the day and whether I was going to see Brian again. When I said Brian and I might grab dinner later, the silence on the phone was absolutely golden. Instead of his usual confident lecture about trust and friendship, Tobias started asking why I felt the need to spend so much time with my ex. I reminded him that he'd spent weeks telling me that opposite-sex friendships were totally normal, and that anyone who had a problem with them was just insecure. He tried to explain why my situation with Brian was different from his situation with Andrea, but every reason he gave just highlighted his own hypocrisy. When I pointed that out with fake innocence, he got even more flustered. That evening, Brian and I did go to dinner, and I made sure to document it thoroughly. We took pictures of our food, selfies at the restaurant, and I even posted a story of us sharing dessert with the caption, "When someone actually knows how to make you feel special." My phone immediately started blowing up with texts from Tobias, but I didn't respond until later that night. When I finally called him back, he immediately started interrogating me about my evening with Brian. I told him we'd had the most amazing time, and that it was so refreshing to be with someone who actually listened to me and cared about my feelings. I said Brian had been asking about my relationship, and couldn't believe how Tobias had been treating me. The panic in Tobias's voice was absolutely delicious. He started insisting that Brian was probably just trying to manipulate me because he wanted to get back together, and that I was being naive if I couldn't see what was really happening. I laughed and said it was interesting that he was so concerned about another man's motives when he'd been lecturing me for weeks about trusting people and not being insecure. I asked him why he was suddenly so worried about my friendships when his own living situation was supposedly so innocent. Saturday, I decided to really turn up the heat. Brian and I spent the day together. We went to the farmer's market, walked around downtown, and just had this really natural, easy time together. I documented everything on social media, making sure to show how happy and relaxed I looked. Meanwhile, Tobias kept texting me, asking what I was doing and why I wasn't responding to his messages. When I finally responded that evening, I told him I'd been having such a great day that I hadn't even looked at my phone. That night when Tobias called, he was clearly agitated. He started lecturing me about how my behavior with Brian was inappropriate and disrespectful to our relationship. I told him I found it fascinating that he was suddenly so concerned about relationship boundaries when he'd been living with another woman all week. When he tried to explain the difference, I cut him off and said that Brian had been helping me gain some real perspective on what I deserved in a relationship. Sunday morning, I woke up to Instagram stories from Andrea showing her and Tobias's domestic routine, making breakfast together, organizing closets, cuddling on the couch. But instead of getting upset, I screenshot them and sent them to Brian with laughing emojis. Brian and I spent Sunday together too, and honestly, it felt amazing to be with someone who was actually focused on making me happy instead of prioritizing another woman's needs. We had this incredibly natural chemistry, and I found myself remembering why I'd been so attracted to him in the first place. When Tobias called Sunday night, I could tell he was getting desperate. He started asking directly if something was going on between me and Brian, and I told him that Brian had been showing me what it felt like to be someone's actual priority. The way Tobias's voice changed was everything I'd been hoping for. All his confidence and smugness just evaporated, and he started backtracking about his living arrangement and saying that maybe we needed to talk about finding some compromises. But I was having way too much fun to let him off the hook that easily. I told him that I'd been doing some thinking about what I really wanted in a relationship, and that spending time with Brian had been really eye-opening. When he asked what I meant by that, I said that Brian had reminded me what it felt like to be with someone who actually respected my feelings and made me feel valued. I said the contrast was honestly pretty stark. Tobias started talking about how he loved me and how we could work things out, but I could tell he was finally realizing that his little manipulation game had completely backfired. I told him I needed more time to think about everything that had happened, and that I'd be in touch when I was ready to discuss our future. Now it's Monday, and my phone has been constantly buzzing with increasingly frantic messages from Tobias. He's oscillating between trying to convince me that I'm overreacting and panicking about my friendship with Brian. If Tobias wanted to test my boundaries and see how much he could get away with, well, he's about to learn that I'm much better at this game than he thought. Some people think they can manipulate their girlfriend into accepting whatever they want to do, but some people are about to discover that two can play at manipulation, and I'm apparently much better at it. Stay tuned for tomorrow's update because I have a feeling our final conversation is going to be absolutely epic. And spoiler alert, I'm not the one who's going to be begging for forgiveness. Last update. Guys, I am dead. I literally cannot stop laughing at what just happened. Tobias just had the most epic meltdown on FaceTime, and I got it all on video. This man really thought he could manipulate me, and I'd just sit there and take it. Nope. So after watching him panic all week about me and Brian, I decided it was time for the grand finale. He'd been sending me these pathetic texts about needing to discuss boundaries, which was rich coming from someone living with another woman. When we FaceTimed, he was at Andrea's place acting all high and mighty. I could see her stupid motivational quotes on the wall behind him, and some fancy candles she probably made him buy. Started lecturing me about how my friendship with Brian was inappropriate. This fool is literally playing house with some girl and wants to tell me about appropriate behavior. But here's the thing, I've been having the best week ever with Brian. We've been inseparable, and honestly, it feels incredible being with someone who actually gives a damn about me. And wait for it. We just booked a trip to Italy next week. Brian surprised me with tickets yesterday, and I'm literally bouncing off the walls excited. First-class tickets to Rome, and he already booked us this amazing hotel in Tuscany with a private balcony overlooking the vineyards. So when Tobias started his usual manipulation speech, I just smiled and told him how amazing Brian had been, how he actually knows how to treat a woman and prioritize her feelings. Tobias's face started turning red immediately, and I could see him trying to stay calm but failing miserably. I could hear his friends in the background because apparently he thought having an audience would intimidate me. Wrong move. I got even bolder and started talking about how Brian had been staying over and how much better I felt with someone who actually cared. I made sure to mention how Brian brought me coffee in bed this morning and how we'd spent the whole weekend together just enjoying each other's company. The way Tobias was squirming was beautiful. He kept trying to explain why his situation was different, but he just kept digging himself deeper. So I asked him straight up, how is it different? Explain it to me and your friends who are obviously listening to every word. That's when he totally lost it. Started yelling about how I was being vindictive and crazy. All his cool manipulation tactics went out the window, and he showed everyone exactly who he really is. I could hear someone in the background saying, "Dude, chill," which made it even better. But the best part was when I told him about Italy. I said Brian had surprised me with this amazing trip, and that we'd be spending a whole week together exploring Rome and Venice. I made sure to mention the first-class flights and the 5-star hotel because I knew it would eat him alive. Tobias looked like he was going to throw up, and I swear I heard Andrea gasp in the background. Then I really went in for the kill. I told him he should probably enjoy his time with Andrea while it lasts because let's be real. Once she finds an actual boyfriend, where exactly does he think he's going to end up? I said it so sweetly too. Like, Tobias, honey, you do realize you're just Andrea's convenient helper boy right now, right? Like when she finds someone she actually wants to date, You'll be tossed out faster than yesterday's garbage, though she might keep you around to do her laundry or fix her computer or whatever other free labor she needs. The silence that followed was incredible. His friends were trying not to laugh, and you could tell Andrea heard every word because there was this awkward tension in the background. I think I heard someone whisper, "Oh damn," which honestly made my whole day. I kept going because I was on a roll. I said, "You really think you're her knight in shining armor, but you're more like her personal assistant who pays rent. She's using you as a placeholder until someone better comes along. You're basically a very expensive doormat with benefits." Tobias was fuming, but he couldn't really deny it because deep down he knows it's true. Andrea's not stupid. She's getting free help with rent and household stuff from some guy who's convinced himself he's being noble. I bet she's already swiping on dating apps while he's organizing her closet. I decided to really twist the knife and said, "I give it 2 months before she brings some new guy home and suddenly your friendship isn't so important anymore. Hope you're saving up for a security deposit because you're going to need it when she kicks you to the curb." That's when he made his biggest mistake. He screamed, "Get over yourself or get lost. I'm giving you one last chance to chill out or we're done." I literally started laughing, like actually giggling on camera. I said, "Tobias, sweetie, we been done. You moved in with another woman and I moved on to someone who actually knows my worth. There is no last chance here because I already upgraded." The panic in his eyes was everything. He immediately started backtracking, saying he didn't mean it and we could work things out. But I was already done with this conversation and having way too much fun. I told him, "While you're busy being Andrea's live-in help, Brian and I will be sipping wine in Tuscany. Have fun organizing her closets and assembling her IKEA furniture or whatever it is doormat roommates do. Maybe she'll even let you hold her purse when she goes on dates with actual men." His friends were definitely laughing at this point because I could hear multiple people trying to muffle their reactions. Andrea's voice came from somewhere off camera sounding really annoyed, and I think she was telling everyone to be quiet. Then I hung up while he was still sputtering and trying to get his friends to stop laughing. My phone immediately blew up with texts from random numbers because apparently Tobias was grabbing everyone's phones trying to reach me. The desperation was honestly pathetic. He sent like 15 messages from different people's phones begging me to talk to him and saying he made a mistake. But then Andrea had the nerve to message me on Instagram saying I should grow a backbone and that my behavior during the call was embarrassing. This woman who's using my ex-boyfriend as a personal ATM and handyman wants to lecture me about embarrassing behavior. I screenshot her message and posted it to my story with, "When your ex's sugar mama thinks she can give you relationship advice." And my friends went absolutely off in the comments. Laura replied with crying, laughing emojis and said, "She really thought she did something there." My cousin Anna commented, "The audacity of this entire woman," which had me rolling. Brian thinks the whole thing is hilarious. He keeps saying he can't believe Tobias actually thought he could treat me like garbage while I'd just sit around waiting for him. We've been planning our Italy trip all evening, and honestly, life is so good right now. He showed me pictures of the hotel restaurant, and apparently they have this amazing rooftop terrace where we can watch the sunset over the hills. The funniest part is hearing through friends that Tobias is trying to tell people I manipulated him and that I'm crazy and vindictive. This man moved in with another woman, sent me selfies from her bed, and somehow I'm the manipulator? The math isn't mathing. What he doesn't get is that I'm not upset about losing him. I'm relieved. Watching him show his true colors saved me from wasting any more time on someone who thinks girlfriends should just accept whatever crumbs they're offered while he plays house with other women. Tomorrow we're going shopping for our trip, and he wants to buy me a new dress for our fancy dinner in Rome. I genuinely cannot remember the last time I was this excited about anything. To anyone dealing with someone who thinks they can test your boundaries and manipulate you, don't even bother arguing with them. Just upgrade to someone better and watch them lose their minds when they realize you're not sitting around crying over them. Tobias really thought he was so clever playing his little games. But while he was busy being Andrea's errand boy and live-in maintenance man, I was out here securing an actual man who treats me like a queen and books surprise trips to Europe. Can't wait to post pictures from Italy while this fool is probably assembling Andrea's new dresser or something equally tragic. Living well really is the best revenge, and I'm about to be living very well in Tuscany with someone who actually deserves me.